I believe that right now is a time for people to take a look at what they need to know to help themselves and their nation make the right decision for energy security. Today, we have a Department of Energy that spends less than 15%, close to 10% of its budget on energy. The remainder is on things that have very little or nothing to do with energy development.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. My guest today has been working for over 3 decades on energy independence for America. I'm with Glenn Rambach. Thanks for joining me.
Pleased to be here, Janaea.
All right. Take us back 30 years. Take us to energy independence, where we aren't yet.
Well, we haven't been independent of foreign oil for more than 3 decades. But I think we all recall the beginning of the energy crisis that we're still in. Started on October 17th, 1973, when after the United States and other countries sided with Israel during an Arab-Israeli war, the punishment for us was an embargo on oil, supported by OPEC, which was led at that time by Sheikh Yamani, who had an MBA from Harvard. And he led the charge, along with King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, to embargo the United States and every other country that sided with Israel. At that time, oil was $2.75 a barrel. A barrel.
$2. Okay.
$2.75 a barrel. Might be $2.50, $2.75 a barrel. And it rocketed up to about $12 a barrel over the next month or two. Then it started going back down. The average oil price from about 1876 to about 1973, so 97 years, was about $20 a barrel. It rarely went over $20 a barrel.
You've got a graph of this, don't you?
I have a graph of it.
Let's look.
And I have several graphs of it, but let me get the easiest one, which is this one here.
Okay.
It
so we've
shows
got level prices from late 18s.
1869, it was $70 a barrel. Went down to $20 a barrel. This is in 2004 dollars, so it's constant dollars, compensating for inflation. $20 a barrel. It never went above except for a moment in World War I.
Except for here,
and
in 73, 74.
Right, 1973, the oil embargo, it shoots past $20 a barrel to 40. And then it immediately starts going back down to about its original $20 a barrel, when in 1979, if you remember, the Shah of Iran was deposed and the U.S. hostages were taken. And there was turmoil in the Middle East again, particularly in Iran, and it went back up to a constant dollars to about $68 a barrel.
Right.
And it started going back down to 20, and it lingered until about 1986. In 1986, Saudi Arabia decided to flood the market with oil. Saudi Arabia at that time was a swing producer. They would follow the holes, and they wanted to ingest a lot more money into their country to support their economy. So they decided to flood the market. The price of oil almost immediately, dropped from $40 a barrel then to right down to the $20 a barrel again, and it stayed there. An interesting point is that when that happened, Saudi Arabia was exporting about 1/3 of the oil that Russia was exporting. The Soviet Union was exporting 2 to 3 times the oil that Saudi Arabia was exporting. The Soviet Union, was earning about $30 to $40 billion a year of hard cash, hard currency was going into the Soviet Union because they were a major exporter of oil at the time. When it went down to 20, they really couldn't export oil. Their infrastructure was old. It didn't make it. So they lost that hard currency in 1986. And that played a huge role in the loss of the Soviet Union.
I was going to say,
and 5 years later, the collapse of the Soviet Union.
So the prices at the end, I see, back up. Here we are now.
Here we are now. The
More
prices started going back up in 1999. They passed $20 a barrel, somewhere around 2000, and went up to $68, $70 a barrel. And today they're languishing at about 300%, 280% above their 1999 price.
So what do we learn from this? We learn that every time there's trouble in the Persian Gulf, our prices go up, so almost.
The 1, 2, 3, 4 biggest peaks there, almost the only peaks are an oil embargo led by Saudi Arabia, turmoil in Iran. This little peak here is the Persian Gulf, the first of many Persian Gulf wars. And then this next huge peak, which brings us up to almost the highest price it ever was, is as a result of, again, turmoil in the Persian Gulf.
So here we are, dependent on foreign oil. How come we're still dependent on foreign oil?
Oh, God, there's so many reasons. Remember, when the oil embargo happened, we were 28% dependent on foreign oil in 1972. As of September, on an annual...
Of which year?
1972.
Okay, 72.
We were 28% dependent on foreign oil.
Okay.
As of September, on an annual basis, for the first time ever, we were 60% dependent on foreign oil. As of
In
last
2006?
month, 2 months ago.
2006?
2006.
How much?
60%.
All right, so we've gone from 28% to 60%.
Right.
We knew it was coming.
Oh, we knew it was coming.
It was right there. It was right in our faces in the early 70s.
The obvious signals were, the two simple signals were there. One is disjointed, and it took the second one to make it obvious. The second one being Saudi Arabia and OPEC and influences outside the United States, even though trained with an MBA from Harvard, chose to do damage to the economy of the United States and do damage to the economy of many free world countries for political reasons. So they showed that they could project a very strong force on foreign economies by committing to economic and political action. Prior to that, 1 year prior to that, they also, there was a radical element that showed that they could project also their interest in influencing terror in other nations, and that was the Olympics in Munich in 1972. So if you just add those two things up, it was abundantly clear that our dependence on foreign oil was a huge threat to our economy and our national security.
So take us to, what did we do about it? What did we? What
Well,
are we?
Remember, the embargo started on October 17th, 1973, I'm sorry. And November 7th, 1973, which is my birthday, Richard Nixon started Project Independence. Project Independence was announced in the State of the Union address, January of 1974. It was announced as part of the State of the Union address, where the first two priorities in Richard Nixon's State of the Union address were to become independent of foreign sources of energy, to provide the basis of our economy and the basis of our national security, which is energy, without influence from other countries. The second thing of the two most important things that he stated in the beginning of his State of the Union address was seeking peace in the Middle East. And he coupled the two together. Peace in the Middle East and energy security were coupled together.
Okay.
Started Project Independence. The goal was to become independent of foreign oil by the end of the decade, which would have been 1980.
Yes, yes.
He doubled the budget, about doubled the budget. There was a budget, at that time there was no Department of Energy. There was ERDA, which is the Energy Research and Development Administration. And that had elements, budget elements. Here I have a chart of it. Budget elements in fission energy, which is conventional nuclear power, fusion, which is the power of the future and always will be, many people say. I worked in a fusion program at Livermore for 7 years.
The power of the future always. Okay, great. I love that. Efficiency.
Energy efficiency,
Okay, the
which is an
middle
important element. These are all elements, and
All
we're not
right,
going to solve
right.
it with one silver bullet. All renewable energy, which is particularly wind and solar.
Okay.
Biomass is in there in renewables, and fossil energy. And you can see the sum of those budgets is about, this is millions of dollars. So that's about $1 billion.
At the beginning of 66 is where we were.
66, yeah, this goes on out.
Right, right.
But from 66 to about 74, it hung around 1.2 billion dollars. This is the immediate result of Nixon's program, and we go from, so here is
Up to 2,500 or so.
I'm sorry?
Up to 2,500 millions.
Yeah,
So
about
doubles.
2.5 billion. And then now remember, Ford became president right, this is Nixon's budget here. It goes up about $1 billion. Ford, in his 1975 speech, State of the Union address, so immediately following Nixon said energy number one, peace in the Middle East number two. Ford, I almost opened up his State of the Union address to Congress saying, I will veto every spending bill you send me except for energy. So Ford,
So he was on board.
He got it.
Okay.
So he brought the budget up to about $3 billion. And then Carter's elected right here and is inaugurated in 1977 and brings the budget up to $6 billion.
So the peak is from Carter's budget.
Yeah, unfortunately, a peak means on both sides it's less.
That's right.
And it was about $6.1 billion for fission, fusion, efficiency, renewables, and fossil energy.
Okay.
All energy sources that can help us become independent of foreign
Research on
sources.
this, R&D.
Yeah, and you can see renewables grew a lot.
Yep.
Right here.
It's
Okay, that
huge.
grew the most. Renewables and fossil grew the most. Renewable seems to have grown more than fossil. About this point in time,
Which is around just after, in 82 or so.
yeah, January 1981, it skyrockets downward because there was a belief.
Plunges. Yes, it plunges down.
Yeah, there was a belief in Washington, for some reason, that this whole thing was market-driven, and that market forces will solve the problem.
What's market-driven? Running out of oil, or?
No, market-driven. The solution to becoming independent of foreign oil was market-driven. So we'll allow the free market to satisfy this, to solve that problem. I believe that energy, like defense, is necessary for is the basis for our economic well-being, our personal well-being, and our security. And without it, we lose a lot more than in many other areas of commodities. We could lose pork bellies tomorrow, and we're not going to become.
You can't have an economy without energy.
The basis
doing
of all
things.
economies is energy. No
So
question about
we
it.
can do stuff.
Right.
Even. I mean, it's.
But because of that, and it's the responsibility of government to protect the economy or the the people of the nation. We do that by funding a military, and I think it's equally important to fund the ability to solve our energy insecurity problems, because not solving those problems has similar effects to not solving problems of national security.
So here we are with the budget's gone down, the research has gone down, and you gave me some numbers about how little we are now spending even on research. I mean, in the Department of Energy.
Well, the Department of Energy was formed in 1978 under the Carter administration, and it aggregated several other agencies. Two key agencies were the ERDA, the Energy Research and Development Administration. Their job was to do whatever it took to use the government's part of the responsibility, not the industry's part, but the government's responsibility to contribute to the solution of energy security and energy independence. It also absorbed the Atomic Energy Commission, which was responsible for nuclear power. The Atomic Energy Commission was responsible for a couple of other things too. So we have this shows an example of the Department of Energy budget that's been around. This shows from 2001 to today.
Okay.
And it's broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 7 or 8 different sections. The largest piece of that budget, and I might add that last year's budget was $23.6 billion. About 7 billion of that, 7.2 billion of that, was for nuclear weapons development, the Nuclear Weapons Stockpile Stewardship Program, and things like that.
So we're paying, the Department of Energy to build nuclear weapons.
It's always done that. The idea was
goodness.
we didn't want the Department of Defense to be responsible for nuclear weapons. I think that paradigm it's time to change that thinking. I don't think there's anything wrong with a different agency. So the issue here is, if you look at, we have nuclear weapons development,
Right.
stockpile stewardship. We have the environmental cleanup of the legacy of nuclear weapons programs. We have science, which is not necessarily and rarely related to energy. And then we have management, which is about $1 billion. And when you look at, if you remove fossil energy from the equation, about 9 to 10% of the entire budget is spent on energy. And that includes renewable energy efficiency, renewables, nuclear fission, conventional nuclear, fusion energy, and then if we add fossil energy, it's about 11% of the total budget is spent on energy.
You know, our renewables are 5, 6, 7% at the most.
One of the smallest bands
Tiny,
is
it's
energy
tiny
efficiency,
here.
and renewable energy is one of the smallest bands there.
How does that stack up with, you know, that's not a lot of money going to war. I mean,
Well, look, you know, if the Department of Defense spent 10% of its budget on defense, you and I would be speaking Russian right now. That's my impression. You know, the Department of Defense certainly spends more than 10% of its budget on defense. Department of Education the same, Commerce the same. I would like to see the Department of Energy do something a little bit different, and that is call out the nuclear weapon stuff has to happen. We have a stockpile of stuff we have to do.
sure.
But that should not be within the Department of Energy, because the Secretary of Energy has a job to do, and in that job, he has to balance the importance of 60% of his program. That's that's nuclear weapons, and the 10% of its program, which is going to participate in making us independent of other sources of energy.
So
that should...
we should have a separate Department of Energy just working with getting us independent.
Yeah, I think two things should happen. The Department of Energy should be the Department of Energy ! Okay. And nuclear weapons is a source of energy. It's just that you consume a heck of a lot of energy in 3/billionths of a second. That doesn't really provide a lot of energy, you know, a lot of power to run our vehicles and our homes and factories and so on, and our economy. It defends our economy, but it doesn't support the economy. So the two things I'd like to see happen is a real Department of Energy that has a commitment, and the commitment is to provide environmentally sound energy sources for the United States that assure the shortest path to independence. First, independence from the challenging nations, which is the Persian Gulf and probably Venezuela, and then from everybody. And that's a tough task, and we just lost 32 years of that. You know, we picked up about 6 years, and then from 1981 to about today, except for a short period in the 90s, we didn't do very much.
So we are really, really behind the 8 ball
yeah,
here.
we're
because
pretty
some are
late.
considering, I mean, how do you tie this in with the peak oil picture or the supply-demand curve?
Well, it's pretty bad timing, isn't it?
I mean, we don't have another
it's the
30
worst of timing.
years,
Yeah.
do we?
No, we don't. No, we don't. And what we know is, oh God, I don't want to quote this guy, is what we don't know. We don't know how much oil is in Saudi Arabia. I don't know if anybody's heard of Matt Simmons, but he's studied a heck of a lot of stuff on Saudi Arabia, and one of the most telling things in his book,
Twilight in the Desert.
Twilight in the Desert,
Right.
is that we don't know. There's no third-party verification of the supply of oil in Saudi Arabia.
So we ought to be treating
All
as
comes
if
from Morocco.
it's, I mean, I've been
Assume
hearing
the worst.
that that's already been
Yeah.
declining the last couple of years. So what could we be doing?
Well,
We had vehicles, you said to me, vehicles that we had much, much better mileage than we're getting now.
Well, going back to policy, just for a second, you cull out all energy into a Department of Energy, and the Department of Nuclear Weapons does nuclear weapons.
Okay.
And there is some crossover because inertial confinement fusion, which is laser fusion, goes through the same process as a thermonuclear weapon does. So there has to be some crossover there. But minimizing that would reduce the confusion between what the Department of Energy should be doing and what it's actually spending a lot of its money on. The second thing is that the budget is, if you add up all of the budgets within the Department of Energy on energy, it's about $2 to $2.5 billion.
$2 billion.
Most of the time since the 90s to today, defending the Persian Gulf. Remember, no oil company will send a tanker through the Strait of Hormuz unless they're assured there's some degree of protection.
Right.
The United States provides that protection, and wisely so. I mean, it's, you know, I don't think anybody would want anyone to send a tanker through the Strait of Hormuz if we weren't assured that it would go in and get out without loss of life or God knows what. So, so to do that, we spend about $50 billion a year in peacetime defending the Persian Gulf.
$50 billion in peace is part of our surcharge then for what
That's
we're
right.
paying for our gas,
Well,
gasoline and oil and so
I
on.
break it up into two things. There's a surcharge that the consumer pays at the pump, and then there's a tax that the taxpayer pays. Turns out it's the same guy. It's just, you know, one time it comes out of his paycheck, and the other time it comes out of his credit card that slides into the gas pump. Yeah, but the taxes we pay to defend the Persian Gulf as a nation, so that all other nations can get their oil from the Persian Gulf as well. We get about 14 to 19% of our oil. If it's 19%, that's about 7 to 8% of our total energy supply comes from the Persian Gulf. But yet we, you know, are spending, if you don't assume that war is part of this,
All right.
about $50 billion a year, about $1 billion a week defending the Persian Gulf.
Okay.
So in 2 weeks, defending the Persian Gulf, we spend the entire Department of Energy Research and Development budget.
Say that again. That's the
about 2 weeks,
contrast.
In about 2 weeks of defending the Persian Gulf in peacetime, we spend about the entire Department of Energy's budget. Now, there are other budgets, but not the Department of Energy. We spend about the same in 2 weeks of defending the Persian Gulf as the Department of Energy spends in a year on trying to solve a huge amount of energy problems. And you know, I believe that flying to the moon was easy, that victories in wars are easy, that probably solving most medical problems are easy compared to energy. Energy is vastly complex for a huge amount of reasons. It's a seething cauldron of policy. It's a seething cauldron of foreign policy. It's a seething in that cauldron is economics, is technology, is development of new materials. It's even the process of assuring that your energy supply, which is again the basis of your economy, isn't affected by turmoil 7,000, 12,000 miles away. It's a huge challenge. It's highly coupled. There's so many things that interrelate that it's almost a challenge that nations can't solve, yet we have to solve it.
We have to because we're all depending on it.
Yeah, we have no other option.
So in our last 5 minutes here, what do we do?
Everything we can. Pull out all the stops. I think one of the things we absolutely have to do, this is 2006, and I think this is the second time since the late 70s that there's been this much attention on energy security and on energy dependence. Jimmy Carter said in, I think it was 78 or 79, that the greatest threat to our economy and our well-being and our security is our dependence on foreign energy. It was said again, it was parroted again in more simple words that we're addicted to oil. We knew that since the 70s.
Sure.
We just didn't do anything about it. The public needs to know things like we're way out of whack in budgets and commitment in Washington. We had a great program, I believe, in the 1990s called the Partnership for a New Generation of Vehicles, which is almost a perfect balance between industry and government and an agreement to build an 80-mile-a-gallon, 5-passenger car. All technologies were on a table. Behavior was on a table right up front. There was the Clinton administration hammered out, I believe, almost a behavioral agreement between the big three auto companies and the Department of Energy to move the idea forward that we could do an 80-mile-a-gallon, 5-passenger car. They defined the cars. We were looking at a number of different hybrid strategies there. We were looking at hydrogen and fuel cells, and we need to get back to that. We need to just simply say that this problem is the problem we have to solve. If we solve that, we protect our economy, we solve our environmental problems, and we solve our climate change problem. Because the two things that are facing us are climate change and peak oil.
Yes.
Those two things define the rest of this century, I believe. If we don't solve them, they clearly define it. If we do solve them, we get to do other stuff in this century. So peak oil and climate change should be the motivators. And everybody needs to know that we're not spending enough. We're spending too much in the wrong place. We spent a total since 1973 of about $90 billion on the solution. And we spent a little bit more than $3,800 billion on our dependence on foreign oil. At the gas pump, we spent about $1.8 trillion above that average buying oil every time it shocked. That's $1,800 billion at the gas pump. That's a surcharge. And then a tax on defending the Persian Gulf over since about 1980 is about $1,300 billion. Yet we only spent $90 billion on a solution. And one of the reasons was we didn't want to tax gasoline 6 cents a gallon. 10 cents a gallon would have given us $220 billion over that time. Would have tripled our budget on solving that. Instead of doing that, we wound up paying 10 times that, 15 times that, defending the Persian Gulf and paying surcharges.
We have a ways to go. Looks like we've gone the wrong path and haven't a lot of time, in a sense.
Well,
we don't have another 30 years.
It's your job to get the word
out. Thanks.
and I think this is a great opportunity. And if people understand what we didn't do, that they didn't know we didn't do, in terms of commitment, national commitment.
That now it's time to pressure us. Let's do it right.
Right. And the words of Cab Calloway and the Blues Brothers, get the word to the street. Everybody has to know. And shows like yours, I'm glad you're doing this, because it's extremely important for this to happen.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Peak Moment, Community Responses for a Changing Energy Future. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Please join us next time.
Peak Moment Television, presented by Yuba Gals Independent Media, produced by Janaea Donaldson, directed by Robin Malgren.